Welcome to the Disney Parks Podcast with your hosts, Tony Casanova from DisneyByTheNumbers.com and Krista Joy from DisneyWays.com. Keep your hands, arms, feet, and legs inside the podcast at all times. And get ready for the Disney Parks Podcast.
Our guest today is Robbie Sherman, who is the son of the late Robert Sherman of the Sherman Brothers. Now, of course, the Sherman Brothers wrote more motion picture musical song scores than any other songwriting team in film history, including Mary Poppins, Chitty Chitty Bang Bang, The Jungle Book, and many, many more. Robbie is the editor of Moose, Chapters from My Life, which is an autobiography written in Robert Sherman's own words and writing style. It's a delightful and unconventional story of a creative giant who changed the fabric of the family musical forever. Robbie is now working on a cabaret called Spoonful of Sherman, and the show has been billed as a celebration of the lifetimes and songs of Robert B. Sherman. It has been received extremely well by the crowd and critics alike. Robbie Sherman, welcome to the show.
So welcome to the show, Robbie. I guess let's start with your dad had written a book called Moose, Chapters from My Life. Can you tell us a little bit about that book?
Absolutely can and love to. First of all, I was the editor of the book, and it was a great honor and a great process to be part of. It was something of about a 10-year journey for me, but something that my dad probably had wanted to do all of his life, which was to have a book published in essence, telling his stories. Obviously, he was at no loss for having many opportunities to have his voice heard, and I don't think he particularly longed for that because he, in fact, had that opportunity sated. But Moose was a chance for him to explore his literary side. It's a collection of about 56, I can't remember exactly, short stories about his life, and it's this very episodic kind of a narrative, but what you get is sort of an arc story. It's like nothing you've read with Disney legends or personalities with the company before, because it really is a work of literature. By the middle of the book, you get a sense of this man's integrity, of my father's integrity. By the end of the book, you know his soul. And you really do get this sense of who the man was and what he represented. And sadly now, because we've lost him, the sense of loss. But also what's really cool about it is a lot of people thought my dad sort of went into retirement or what have you. And what you get a sense of is what he has been doing or had been doing for the last 10 years, 20 years of his life, because he talks about that as well. And you see this great masterwork of the man who wrote the lyrics for Feed the Birds and Supercalifragilisticexpialidocious and It's a Small World After All, the first world anthem ever written. And you get that same sense of poetry here. Walt Disney once called my father the poet. He referred to him as the poet when introducing him to some dignitaries, and I think that comes across in this book.
Yeah, I guess, how did they get the name Moose, Chapters from My Life? Is that a nickname?
Well, Moose is a nickname. My father decided to use his nickname. He had about 3 or 4 different titles he was playing with, and then when he finally assembled the book, he decided that it would be called Moose. Chapters from My Life came from one of our copy editors who said, you got to tell people that it's an autobiography, either, something like Chapters from My Life or Pages from My Life or something, and my dad decided to have that as the subscript title.
Yeah, and the stories in this are not in chronological order, right? This has a different presentation of like a biography or story kind of telling to it.
Yeah, and it was at first a bit disconcerting because, and I described this in my editor's introduction to the book, and I hope people read that. But one of the things that I point out is that my father, I basically around 2004, the bulk of the stories that would eventually be put together for final publication, not everyone, because he did some more work in 2009 and 2010, but he assembled the book. What I had done is I printed out all of his short stories and stapled each of the stories together. He spent the next 3 days at his dinner table here in London, and it had become sort of a workstation, and he had assembled 7 piles of these stories, maybe 12 stories in one and 10 in another and 8 in another one. And it was stacks row by row, and I was watching him do this because I lived next door to him, and curious as to what he was going to do. And finally, at the end of about 3 days, he says, it was morning time, he said, Robbie, here's my book, and I'm going to call it Moose. And he handed me these stacks of stories, and that was at the same time that he said that this was what he was naming the book, and which I understood the reference because I knew that he had this. By the way, the reason he has the nickname, or had the nickname, was because he could wiggle his ears and flare his nostrils at the same time, which was a remarkable resemblance to a moose. And he'd gotten this nickname back in college. And my dad, he handed me these stories. Said, "I'd like you to read this." And I said, "Okay." And what he meant, though, was to read it in front of him. So I sat in his library and living room, and same room, and I sat there and I started reading through it, and I realized the 7 piles were different themes. I didn't figure this out until about halfway through the book, but the first one had to do with his World War II experiences. And for those of your listeners who don't know, he was a World War II veteran, very decorated. He won the Purple Heart. He was the first American soldier at the liberation of the first of 8 men at the liberation of Dachau concentration camp, which is a remarkable thing when you think that 20 years later he wrote these gentle songs like "Feed the Birds" and the like, and it's really remarkable sort of a spectrum of a man's life. And he saw these atrocities up close and was first viewer. That's one thing you don't want to have the red carpet premiere treatment to is seeing something as horrific, the most horrific thing of the 20th century, the genocides in Germany and Poland. And my father was there, and so these stories, he's going into the stories, but they're even the war stories, which was the first section of the book, section 1 of the 7 sections. Even that first section, the war stories were out of order. And I read the first story, then the second story, and the third one, and I said, "Dad, these aren't in order." And I really expected that he was going to do something chronological, tell us childhood stories, then maybe the war stories, and college years, and Disney years, and beyond that. And that wasn't what he did. And at first it was very disconcerting. I didn't know why he was doing this and what he was thinking. I said, just keep on reading, just keep on reading. I read 3 stories, 4 stories, and then it clicked with me. I figured out what he was doing, and I think this has been the general consensus with readers, by the way, which I'm very gratified by, and that is that he actually brings you through his life. It's like he weaves you into the fabric of his life, and you see the atrocities of the war. You see how it can darken a person's spirit, and then he brings you into the very light-hearted stories of his early childhood, and you realize what he'd lost, and then he brings you to other places, and he does this in the most masterful way. Now, I was very familiar with each of these stories. Some of them I typed as he was dictating them. Other ones I typed out from his handwritten notes. All of them I edited. I did the first series of copy editing on, and I knew these stories backwards and forwards, but they had a completely different life, put in the order that he put. And that was one of the great geniuses of my father, was understanding structure in a way that was nothing short of masterful.
Yeah. It's good.
Good stuff. Yeah. Have you been able to choose a favorite chapter of the book? I'm sure that you love them all very much, but
well, there's one that I like a lot, and it's one called "We Stinky." It's about the early television industry, and it's the names were changed to protect the guilty, as they say. It's a very funny story, and it's funny. I know the characters who he's talking about in the "We Stinky" chapter or chapters, and but I can't get the voice of Krusty the Clown from The Simpsons out of my head whenever We Stinky speaks.
Yes.
It's kind of the same guy. Basically, it was a TV personality who had a children's show. And in fact, this is a fellow who Pee Wee Herman based his character on. So it was, but from the 1950s. And anyway, so when you read the story, you'll get a sense of it.
Okay, yeah, love that. Now, you've also done a musical retrospective of not only your father and your uncle's work, but also that of your grandfather, Al Sherman. Can you tell us about Spoonful of Sherman?
Absolutely. What a magnificent thing that turned out to be. Wasn't expecting it to be anything more than a two-night show, and it became much more than that. What we did is a cabaret here in London, where I live, London, England, and it covered 90 years of Sherman music. And the reason we did it was because we were releasing the book, Moose, Chapters from My Life, and we wanted to have some sort of an event that would sell books and introduce it to the public. So in order to do that, we needed to have something. My father sadly wasn't around to do a book signing. He'd already passed away. And I knew that just as the editor and the not as famous son, for me to sign the book, even as the editor, would not necessarily be as enticing to an audience. So I thought about it and said, why don't we do a musical show? After all, and that way it's a happy thing, and it can give the book a real great send-off and inaugurate it to the public. So we put together some of London's finest musical performers, including award-winning singers and actors. We have a West End musical director who's conducted big orchestras here on the West End. And, for those of your audience who aren't aware, London has a thriving and is an important theater business going on with it, as does New York and Broadway. And so what you have here, and that you don't necessarily have as much in Los Angeles or Chicago or other places, is this incredibly vibrant theater world. Chicago, you have it more than in L.A. And so we were able to do this wonderful musical retrospective of my father's life, introduce the book, but it also garnered 4 stars from the London Times. From the reviewer Clive Davis of the London Times. We had, I think, something like 30 or 40 interviews, all available online. And A Spoonful of Sherman was a rave hit, and it was one of those things that just was an unexpected success in a big, big way. And we cover 90 years of music, my grandfather's songs, my dad and uncle's songs, of course, feature, and we also do 2 or 3 of mine, because I'm also a songwriter. So that was great fun. I was the narrator, and it was terrific.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Now, did you? I know you mentioned a few people specifically, but who is it that you have doing the show with you?
So the music director is a man who I've worked with on a number of different projects. His name is Colin Billing. The 2 girl singers are Emma Williams and Charlotte Wakefield. Charlotte, while we were doing our second string of shows in April, Charlotte was nominated for an Olivier Award, which is like the Tonys, but in London. And she didn't get that Olivier, but still it shows you the caliber of the artist that we were able to bring onto this. We've never done a show that had this kind of first-class cabaret style, and some of the songs that you never hear in a cabaret setting. Like, for example, we did the song "Lovely Lonely Man" from Chitty Chitty Bang Bang, and it just brought the house down. And yet it's a song that sort of doesn't fit into the movie or even the stage musical, but it works so incredibly well in that cabaret setting. The two guys in the boy singers, well, grown men actually, were Greg Castiglione and, give me a second, Stuart Matthew Price. Both, and all four of these singers are really well known as up-and-coming superstars, and each one of them, I'm sure you'll see them in each one of them is a superstar.
Robbie, do you think the show would play well in the U.S.? Do you think you'll bring it to the U.S. or continue?
We're in discussion. We did so the future life of the show is as follows. We're in the process right now of doing an OCR, or original cast recording, of A Spoonful of Sherman, and the executive producer is a friend of mine named Nicholas Lloyd Webber. You may know the name Lloyd Webber. He's the son of another iconic songwriter. You may have heard of him, Andrew Lloyd Webber.
Right.
And Nick and I basically teamed up on this. Nick wants to bring the show to a bigger forum, and we have a number of iconic songwriting families actually working on this right now. I can't speak to all the different names, but believe me, you know them all. And it could be a very exciting thing. So there'll be concerts, and hopefully we'll be bringing the tour, bringing it on tour to the U.S. and to the U.K. and worldwide in the near future. So that's the plan. That's what we're working toward, and hopefully soon I'll have really solid news on that.
That sounds great.
Yeah, keep us posted. That's awesome.
Yeah. Well, I'll definitely keep you posted on that, and also love to announce the album when it's out.
Oh yeah, that'd be great too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Your family really has a musical legacy, and I really think people are interested in it, and I think they would definitely buy an album and definitely go to a Broadway or cabaret type show instantly, without doubt.
Well, the thing is that the songs that are recognizable are instantly right. There are things that 3/4 of the globe knows by heart.
Right.
Mary Poppins, Chitty Chitty Bang Bang, The Jungle Book, Winnie the Pooh, It's a Small World. Those are 5 things I just mentioned off the top, and you could probably name songs from 4 of them, if not 5 of them.
Right.
Well, It's a Small World is one song, and there's a half dozen other pieces that a lot of people know: Bedknobs and Broomsticks, The Aristocats, Charlotte's Web, Slipper and the Rose, and the list goes on there as well.
Right.
Sword in the Stone, The Parent Trap, and then you have, but then we also mix it up a little bit with songs that you didn't ever hear of before, but they're fantastic songs. They're songs by my grandfather, songs, and I like to think that the couple songs that I've done, even if people aren't as familiar with them, it kind of makes a thing which could seem a little bit sad in that it's as a retrospective of my father's life, yet it gives yet it sort of shows that there's a continuation of the legacy in one form or another, and so I think that makes it a very positive thing, and I know it's something my dad would have been behind as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, we want to hear the stuff you've written too. It's just as special to us.
But one of the things that we're able to do is actually tell the narrative story of my father's life, and that's why narrating it myself makes it a very personal journey that the audience takes with us. It takes with us on the stage.
Right.
By hearing about my dad going into war, and then you hear a war song that was sung by Frank Sinatra originally in World War II, called "There's a Harbor of Dreamboats," and sadly, and it's a very strange twist of fate, although there have been a number of recordings of it, the one person who made it famous was Frank Sinatra. But sadly, Sinatra never recorded the song because there was a musician strike in 1943, and they couldn't record it at the time. But he sang it every week on a radio show called Your Hit Parade.
Wow.
And so there's a real poignancy to this show. And it's not just a collection of songs. Everybody who's walked out of the show has said, I had no idea that there was this much great material in under the Sherman name. They knew that there was a lot of great stuff, but they didn't know half of the songs. We do one of the beautiful songs from The Parent Trap, which is a song called For Now, For Always. We do another song from Charlotte's Web called Mother Earth and Father Time. And I'm telling you, you could hear a pin drop. My grandfather's stuff, it's like listening to an old radio show. Potatoes are cheaper, tomatoes are cheaper, now's the time to fall in love, which was a massive, massive Depression-era song. They didn't have top 10 hits back then, but in 1933, had they had that chart, it would have been number one for many, many weeks. That's the kind of songwriter my grandfather was. And, we have this legacy. So, why not show this family legacy? To me, that's all part of the story of the Sherman Brothers, that the Sherman Brothers found Disney, and Disney found the Sherman Brothers was definitely a thing fated in the stars, in the sense that Walt Disney found two guys who were all about family and their own families and family music generally, because that's what we all do.
Yeah, and like I said, I think you guys have a rich legacy, and I know we'll talk about something a little bit later, but your father was also a great painter, and you arranged for a number of expositions of his work. How would you describe his artistic talent?
We're talking about his visual artistic talent. Specifically.
Yeah.
Well, not being a trained painter myself, I wouldn't have quite the vernacular or the lexicon rather, to really do it credit. I would say that there's a certain impressionistic quality to his style. He definitely has a painterly style, very layered like his lyrics. There's much more going on underneath the surface. And he's one of these painters who will paint many layers before you see the skin. And that's what gives the painting the depth that it has. And all the great painters had this, I think, or many of the great painters. So, that's probably the words I would give you for that. What's fascinating about my dad's many talents, including writing literature, is that these are beneath the surface. It wasn't that he was shy. I wouldn't actually describe my father as a shy man or even an introvert. I think that word actually is a disservice to him, although credible people have used that expression to describe him. I prefer to say that he was introspective, and he was very secure in his own talents and didn't need to constantly show the world things. So, for example, the fact that he painted 10 years before he ever wrote songs. I think his first painting that I've seen was in 1941. And we had our first art exhibit in 2002. So there was 61 years between the first time he allegedly picked up a brush and the first time there was ever an exhibit. People were shocked that this person who's known for his lyric writing and great songs also had this visual quality to his artistic plume. So I think that but the point I guess I'm trying to get across is that it wasn't that he was hiding it or that it was a secret. We had the paintings all over our house, hanging on walls. Family friends saw them at dinner parties all the time and commented on them and liked them. Some people didn't like them, as is common and acceptable with art. Not everybody likes everything, but most people liked his stuff. And there was no secret in it. It wasn't something that was ever advertised or publicized. And when I decided to do the art show, it was shortly after my mother had passed away, and I wanted to sort of get my dad out there and doing stuff again. We had the opening of Chitty Chitty Bang Bang, the stage musical here in London, and I thought, well, why not get my dad an art show at the same time. We can piggyback on the back of the Chitty machine, and that was not the car, but the PR machine.
Yes.
And that's what we did. And it turned out to be a really great thing, and something it reignited interest in what my dad was doing, and it was sort of the start of something, I think, when we did that, because people started to see these other sides of my dad that his family knows, and his close friends knew, but wasn't something that he advertised.
That's wonderful. I'm so glad that you did that. Can you tell us, Robbie, there's so much creativity in the house. I can't even imagine. What was it like growing up being the son of a Sherman brother?
Well, that's a funny question. I've been asked that question a number of times. Well, to be the son of a Sherman brother, I think it depends on which Sherman brother. But because it's a very different experience, I think, being the son of Robert Sherman versus being the son of Richard Sherman. I'll speak to what it was like to be the son of Robert Sherman. I think it was kind of what you and your listeners would kind of hope it would be. It was filled with creativity. My father was constantly dealing in artistic metaphor. What do I mean by that? One time, I've always had trouble smelling things. Just a personal anecdote. And we were driving. We lived in Beverly Hills. We were driving somewhere. I was probably 16 or 14 years old. I'm not sure. And driving by this field of roses on Santa Monica Boulevard, the Rose Gardens of Beverly Hills. And I said, my dad says, they must smell beautiful. And by the way, my father and mother were great gardeners. They had a collection of roses as well. They had many rose bushes, and I said to my dad, I wouldn't know. I never smelled a rose. And he said, you never have. And he made a U-turn on Beverly Boulevard, and we went right back to the rose garden. He went through the different roses with me and had me, and he felt it was very important. And these were his words: you must always take time in life to smell the roses. So
literally and figuratively.
Yeah, but figuratively, but also literally. And,
yes.
and that's what he taught me to do, is how to smell the roses, how to take time to enjoy things in life. He always wanted me to try new things and have a spirit of adventure in everything that I did, much as he did. And when you read his book, The Moose Chapters from My Life, you'll see that that's exactly how he lived his life. That was behind his move to London. That was behind his very Jack Kerouac trips to Mexico and the Southwest. This is, he lived a very rich and adventurous life. That was, and my mother was similar, more conservative, I think, in her general lifestyle, but she also believed that you should enjoy life, and so I would say that was very true. It was very musical. My father loved music, and even though he was more the lyricist of the Sherman Brothers, he himself was a very musical man and loved music. When he would paint at home, which was a favorite pastime, he would be listening to all kinds of either classical or ragtime music. That was his particular interests in music, and it wasn't superficial. He could go deep into Debussy or into Tchaikovsky, and his record collection reflected that.
Yeah, so you made an interesting comment. So did your dad like to paint as a creative outlet, or did your dad like to paint because he wanted to kind of express his artistic his visual artistic rather than his written artistic, being a lyricist?
I'm not sure I understand the question, because it sounds like it's too... it was a creative outlet. I mean, my father had many creative outlets. Yeah. I think to understand my father, and one could make a career of understanding my father, I don't think he was a simple person to categorize. The first rule of being able to understand him is to not put your own stuff on him, not to assume, well, this is what I would do. He was truly a creative person, and That's how I would start. This is a person who spent his life in a creative mode, and that has many different aspects. So if he wasn't painting, he was writing lyrics. If he wasn't writing lyrics, he was writing a short story. He loved to read as well, and he had, so there was also passive interests as well, like reading and listening to music. But he had this, but that was a restful activity, if you will.
Yeah.
But it was always fueling a very creative spirit. So was it because of a frustration that he wasn't getting things out? No, I don't think he was a frustrated man. I think that he was very creative. The reason you didn't see him writing as many lyrics and movie scores in the 1990s and the 2000s, although there was a bit of a pickup in the 2000s, had more to do with Hollywood not really doing his kind of movies, and when they did do them, they would start to dictate what songs he was to write, and he knew better what songs should be written in the show, because this was his business. People telling him how to do it were businessmen, not songwriters, and so I think he wanted to be creative. So he would find ways and to be creative, and I don't think it was a frustration for him at all. Actually, I think it just was a very natural outlet. If he wasn't allowed to be creative in one way, then he would go someplace else. He didn't believe in hitting his head against a brick wall.
I see what you're saying there. Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Yeah. So tell us about, I know you had mentioned to us before the interview started that you were working on Sherman Family Archives. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, one of the things that we were starting even before my father passed away was this archival project. I mean, we knew that it was all there, but it was, in mothballs and storage. My father, one of his great creative outlets was photography. He loved photography, and it was one of the reasons the book came out as late as it did, is because he wanted a lot of photographs in the book. And there really are a tremendous collection of photographs in the book. I just wish the pictures were a little bit larger so people could see them clearer. I think in the next edition it's going to be a little bit bigger, so it won't be so hard to see. And where my father got this great hobby was from his father. In 1922, my grandfather bought a Brownie camera and razzmatazz, and they decided to, that's, by the way, a reference to the song Making Memories from Journey into Imagination for your Florida friends. Yeah. Which I was actually privileged to be at the recording session of in 1981. We have over 15,000 photographs that my father took, and we have probably around 3,000 to 5,000 photographs that my grandfather took, because he was into photography as well, as I mentioned. So all of those have been scanned, and now it's just a matter of putting them on our archives. It'll be an online archival, reasonably accessible. There'll be different tiers of accessibility. We probably won't be online till 2016, but for the public, that is. And there'll be other things as well. There'll be lead sheets for the music that we have, and so that people can access sheet music. Both of my grandfather's and my dad and uncle's stuff. There'll be other things as well. There'll be there'll be contracts, old contracts. There'll be things that maybe won't be accessible to everybody, but they'll be accessible to the business side of what we do at the Sherman Estate. And there'll be books, there'll be original memos from the Disney days, what have you, notes in my father's own handwriting, images of his paintings. And again, this will be something that will be accessible on different tiers. But it's a massive, massive project. Like I said, there'll be easily 40,000 entries in this. And the idea is that it be completely cross-referenceable. So let's say you want to see paintings from 1953. You should be able to type in paintings 1953, and you'll get the things my dad painted in 1953.
Wow. We'll definitely be looking forward to that. That is amazing.
Yeah. I can't wait to see that.
and there have been some of the people from Disney Music Archives who've said that they'd love to roll up their sleeves and help out with that, which is fantastic. I'm hoping to have a really good cooperation, because I think we can give them some stuff and they can give us some stuff. And the idea is that it should be accessible for everybody, you know.
Yeah. Because I was going to ask, will some of the music be included in that too?
Well, that's the other thing I want to do is have, and this goes back to, this is one of the reasons this takes time, is I don't know how much of it we can do, but one of the things I would like to do is to have recordings also accessible. So if, let's say, you find a song that you like, you can get everything on the song. And again, depending on if you should have, maybe the average member of the public shouldn't see private contracts, but what they could do is they could see the lead sheet, see the actual printed sheet music, the lead sheet being what the songwriter or somebody who writes in pen, a professional copyist writes out, and then you'd have and then maybe have a couple different sound recordings of it. So maybe you have Peggy Lee singing something, or you have, and then the Frank Sinatra version, and then you have whoever else, and you can actually access it all in this one place. So yes, that would be something. Sound files would definitely be something I would seek to provide on there. Now, the question is whether we can make that fully public. Probably not. It would probably have to be something that people, let's say, somebody with academic credentials might be able to go in, and we know that it's not going to be republished. Or if there's somebody who's really doing some research, if Randy Thornton calls up and says, from Disney Music, says, "Listen, we want to do this album. Do you have I see that you have the records here. Can I just listen to it once so that I can hear what it is, and then I'll, for reference purposes, and then he can, seek out the permission." That kind of a thing. I would like to have everything in one place, but again, it would have to be for home use at this point, for some of that stuff.
Yeah. Sounds great. When you get that done, Robbie, let us know and we'll...
It'll be big news, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, speaking of which, we were hoping you could just tell everybody how they can best follow you on the internet and keep up with the latest that you're doing.
I'd love to tell you. There's a Facebook page, which I've used as sort of a default terminal of information. It's called Sherman Brothers. It's a group, and it's Sherman Brothers with all capital letters. If you don't see it in all capital letters, then that isn't the Sherman Brothers one. It's a Facebook group. So you go to Facebook, www.facebook.com/groups/Sherman Brothers. That should bring you there.
Yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And you'll put the link on your page, I assume.
And that's a great picture that you have on the group, too.
Oh, the one on the banner head?
Yes, right.
Isn't that nice? That was actually my parents' house at 601 North Oakhurst. It's a great picture with my dad smoking the cigarette and my uncle. Yeah, they're talking. Yeah, I like that photo.
Now, the picture behind your uncle almost looks like a picture of the London Tower.
Well, you know what that photo is, what that picture is.
I have a feeling, but go ahead and tell me.
I think you know. It's from Mary Poppins.
Yeah.
It was one of Peter Ellenshaw's Ruff's painted sketches, concept pieces. It was like the one piece that would have gotten approval from Walt, and then and that was a gift from Peter.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
So I love your Facebook group. I highly recommend everybody join and check it out, because you have some wonderful content that you post almost every day. It's great. So we just want to thank you so much, Robbie, for your time. This was wonderful. We can't wait for you to come back and share more, and just appreciate you coming on the show. And we're just so excited that you're doing these things, and we get to just keep honoring your father's legacy, your family's legacy. Wonderful, exciting. Thank you so much.
Krista, Tony, thank you both very, very much. I really appreciate the opportunity, and anytime you'd like, please, by all means, just let me know.
The Disney Parks Podcast is not affiliated with the Walt Disney Company. All Disney parks, attractions, lands, shows, event names, etc. are registered trademarks of the Walt Disney Company.
like a bolt out of the blue. Fate steps in and sees you through.